Well, we are honored to host our guest speaker, Steve Pereira. I've been following Steve's work for some time and interested in thought leaders in this space like Karen Martin. So we were eagerly awaiting his new book, Flow Engineering, which I think came out in around about May this year. Steve has spent over 2 decades improving the flow of work across organizations. He's worked through tech support, IT management, um, build and release engineering, and as a founding CTO for enterprise SaaS. So after shifting to consulting to large enterprises on value stream performance improvement, he created Flow Engineering to make value stream mapping quick, simple, and actionable. He serves as lead consultant for Visible Flow Consulting. He's chair of the Oasis Value Stream Interoperability Technical Committee and co-founder of the Flow Collective to bring flow-focused professionals together. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Steve. And I see, Steve, you've shared screen already, and I'll leave the floor to you now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to get a head start. I know folks don't really want to wait to get to questions, because I think that's probably the most entertaining part of this is getting your specific questions answered. I don't know how familiar folks are with flow engineering. So if you want to talk about, you've read the book and you have specific questions, let me know in the chat. Let us know in the chat, and we can go deep. Or if you've never heard of this before, let us know in the chat. That's really helpful for me, because I never know where folks are coming from when it comes to this material, these ideas. Flow engineering really kind of originated out of trial and error for me, trying to solve problems, flow problems as a CTO, and having to bring together a bunch of different perspectives and professionals and solve problems. So that's really where it shines. It was engineered to solve specific flow problems, throughput problems, overload problems, excessive wait times, waste, delays, and then generally just understanding what is our flow, what is happening, where should we focus our attention, where can we improve. So a lot of folks will think about flow in terms of the individual context, their individual context. As contributors, we have flows inside of our specific activities that we do on a regular basis. We try to focus, we start tasks, we get stuck, we try to work our way through friction and lack of clarity and dependencies and coordination issues. And really what we're trying to do is like maximize this value added time, right? The time that we're spent on delivering value. And, there's a couple of dependencies that need to be satisfied for us to do that. We need to understand what value is and how to create it and enhance it and develop it. Flow engineering really is focused on maximizing this. But we don't focus on individuals. We focus on the collective flow. And these things are interdependent, right? You unfortunately can't spend a lot of time in individual flow unless you have collective flow. You get interrupted by other people, you have dependencies, you have to wait, you have policies. So collective flow really is a major impact on individual flow. And the state of individual flow is, it might seem like it's getting worse all the time. I don't know if it's getting better or worse, but we spend single-digit percentages of our time actually contributing deliverable work. This is kind of a crisis of productivity, right? And being effective. But this is not what we're aiming to solve for directly. We zoom out first. So with flow engineering, we improve in individual flow by improving collective flow. We look at the big picture. And I think that this is, the big opportunity for the Sooner, Safer, Happier community is to look at this big picture. This is a big picture group. We're looking at big picture impact. We're looking at value at an organizational level, performance at an organizational level. So what we're talking about when we're talking about collective flow is eliminating as much of this waiting and delay time in the flow of work as possible. And the way to do that is to understand this big picture, right? And that's where flow engineering kind of shines. And I'll show you how that happens. But first of all, why are we in this crisis of friction and delay and waste and confusion? We have all these things that get in the way of productivity and flow in our work, right? All these different conditions that stop us from continuously delivering value, developing value, and collaborating with other people. We have constant interruptions and escalations and dependencies and interruptions, um, and we're looking for information that we can't find, and we get stuck trying to make decisions that are difficult or outside of our control. But these are the things we can see. Things we can see are actually the easy things to solve. The invisible challenges are the most problematic. And they kind of manifest in a couple of different ways. Some of the ways that we examine in the book and that we kind of focus flow engineering on is this idea that everyone has a different perspective. Everyone sees the biggest problem differently. They might see completely different problems, or they can't agree on what we should focus on, what's the most important thing. But even just understanding the current state, it depends on everyone's perspective. And sometimes we only see a piece of the puzzle. So bringing those perspectives together is a big challenge. Another challenge is the fact that we're aiming at different things. Some of us are trying to get a bonus or maximize our bonus. Some of us are trying to achieve technical goals or professional goals in terms of getting promoted or finishing a big project, or just making it through the week, right? These things pull us in different directions. And because they're invisible, they're very hard to address. The other thing is we can be thinking about completely different areas of focus. Sometimes we're thinking short term, some people are thinking long term, some people are thinking big picture, some people are thinking in the details. And so this means it's very difficult to have a productive conversation. You ever wonder why you go into a meeting with a goal and you come out of the meeting and you feel like you've accomplished nothing? We're often talking past each other, right? We're often not even really speaking the same language, even though we can be technically speaking the same language. We're using words completely differently, right? When I talk about dependency, I can mean very different things. When I'm talking about targets, metrics, what's important can mean so many different things depending on where I'm standing. And so this is a view that everyone is familiar with, the typical org chart. And when we're talking about this big picture view and what actually matters to delivering value is tracing the path to that value across the entire organization, right? All the way from its inception to delivery. And we could draw those goalposts wherever we want. We, I think, get the biggest impact when we think about the biggest picture of this, the most complete picture of start to finish. Because the clock is ticking, right? The clock is always ticking. Someone's always waiting for what they want. And so looking at this entire flow is extremely valuable. We call this a value stream, can really be called whatever you want, but it's this complete path that it takes to deliver value. And the problem is that we only ever really see a small portion of this, right? So what happens is if we can only see a small portion of this value stream, that's where we focus our efforts, right? We're going to be trying to improve in the area that's most readily available to us. And the problem with that is often that the constraint, our biggest opportunity, our biggest challenge is outside of that. And it often is upstream with another department who doesn't care about improving something for us because they have their own problems, right? So how do we get around this? We start by understanding this big picture and then starting to align our understanding of value with everyone's understanding of value and connecting all those dots together so that we can collectively improve. So the next question folks commonly ask after asking what is a value stream and how is that relevant to me is where are these streams? And I'm kind of like a big tent value stream person. I think that there are The model of a value stream applies in a million places across an organization. And I find that the model is very, very valuable. I can put the value stream model on any number of activities. Obviously, product development is a very common one in the digital world and in software. This idea of idea to delivery, but I apply this equally as powerfully in things like service requests or incident response, onboarding new hires, onboarding customers, developing platforms, developing marketing campaigns, sales processes, you name it. Everything has a start and finish, everything has a flow to it, and value stream principles and practices apply across the board. So this is a set of tools and models for thinking about flow and value delivery that you can apply everywhere across an organization because we have these flows of activity everywhere. So one of the things that we talk about in flow engineering is the ultimate goal of this is delivery of value. And to make that sustainable and continuous and all the things that we want, to create a viable, vibrant, successful business is we have to enable flow. We have to make it easy to deliver value. But before we're able to do that, we have to understand the system and develop a strong understanding of what needs to be improved in the system to enable flow. But before that, we have to understand what is most important, right? What are we driving at? What are we aiming for? What are the conditions that we want to develop in the system? So we work backwards. And flow engineering really is a title for a set of practices that is meant to enable flow by way of building clarity and identifying value. Without those things, you can enable flow and just create a bunch of garbage or waste, right? Just doing things faster, doing the wrong things more effectively or efficiently. So it's very important that we identify value and build clarity first. So with that in mind, what we do is we map in order to create those conditions, to identify value, to build clarity, and to enable flow. We have 5 maps in flow engineering. Starting with outcome, then looking at current state value stream. Then we look at dependencies that are causing the negative conditions that we find in the current state value stream. Then we create a future state value stream map that incorporates all of our ideas and experiments for improvement and envisions a better state for that value stream. And then we lay out experiments and actions, ways to actually create that future state with a flow roadmap. So this was kind of born out of this initial practice of value stream mapping that I kind of stumbled into and then realized, okay, we can't just jump into value stream mapping. There's initial upstream conditions that we need to satisfy. We need to be very clear about what we're trying to do. And then we also need to carry it forward. So once we learn things, we should act on them, right? We don't want a state of like a retrospective where we learned a bunch of things, then we leave and say like, oh, we'll try harder next time, or hopefully that goes better in the next iteration. We want to act effectively. So we go all the way to creating a roadmap to lay out specifically who's going to do what and how it's going to happen and how we're going to measure success. So when we do this, what happens is we see higher throughput. So this number can be anywhere from double to 8 times, 10 times. I'm never surprised by seeing really dramatic increases in throughput because before we look at a value stream and map it out, we really don't know how much waste is happening and how quickly we can address that waste once we look at it and once we map it out. Another thing, if you're in incident response or if you're in, a condition of trying to improve quality, mean time to repair can also be dramatically impacted. Another thing, and you might recognize these as DORA metrics. A lot of folks are focused on DORA metrics. Flow engineering does really well in helping you first measure what your metrics are in a team very quickly without standing up any software or collecting any um, data, because that can be a huge roadblock for folks. But we can actually influence those metrics very, very dramatically and very quickly. So the next question, who does this? Who's supposed to do this? Who do we need to get together to do this? And it's a variety of people. It can be uh, ideally an executive sponsor, someone with some authority and ability to approve budget or space, time, resources to act on improvements and to actually change and influence the system. So an executive sponsor is very important. It's also very important to have a facilitator, so someone who can run the workshops and guide everybody through the process. I've learned this the hard way, but if you're currently a coach or a leader of any kind, if you don't mind running a board game, you can be a flow engineering facilitator. We really laid out the practices in the book in a way that we hope are very easy to follow. And I've heard very good things from folks who've never run a workshop, who've picked up the book and gone through it with their teams and said it was scary before I got started, but once we got into it was easier and easier. And it's really been something beneficial. So don't let facilitation scare you. But if you like any support, reach out to me and I will hold your hand as much as you need. And then once we look at actually collecting data and this picture of the value stream, we need contributors from the value stream. We need the folks who are doing the work, who know what's happening on the ground and how it all fits together. So we build out this picture of the value stream by bringing all those folks together into the workshops. It looks like a collaborative whiteboard. This can be in person if you're lucky enough or unlucky enough to be in an office or in co-located in a space. You could put Post-its on a wall, but we have a bunch of templates that can serve as your canvas for doing this work and can guide you through the process. But we aim to take 90 minutes per session and at a bare minimum, but to make it easy to schedule and fit into your calendar, we aim for 90 minutes to create each map, just to make it as quick and easy as possible. And you don't need perfection to get really great results. So what these maps actually look like, outcome mapping really is understanding the landscape. So we collect a bunch of raw material, ideas, pains, questions, context, and distill it down into a target outcome. And the value stream map really just looks like a flow of activities with some data attached to it that we collect from people. Dependency mapping is a deeper dive into the hotspots, what we call the big problem areas or the opportunities. The future state map is just a lean and mean version, an optimized version of the current state value stream map. And then the flow roadmap is a very typical now, next, later roadmap with a couple of extra dimensions to make it a little bit more optimized for action. And I like to call out mapping because I find that, mapping is something that maybe a few of us do, and it may not be a very natural or automated thing that we sort of reach to just map things out. But I think it's very powerful, and I think it's definitely one of the most important aspects of flow engineering. And it's because not only does it bring people together, we're bringing people together in a way that is engaging them. It's pulling them to be involved and connected to the work in a new way. It's very sort of tangible and goes a little bit beyond your typical meeting, where it can be very passive and verbal in a way that we're communicating often past each other, right? It's very easy to point something out in detail on a map and say, this is what I'm talking about. And, get it worded in a way that resonates with people, or word it in 5 different ways and have everyone pick the way that resonates most with them. But we build this shared context with everyone. And by building a map together, we own that outcome. We own the map together, which is a representation of our environment. It's a very powerful thing that we can use as an asset and an artifact going forward. We naturally bring people's perspectives together and into alignment. We can drive agreement from people, or we can disagree and commit, right? We can be very clear and conscious about where we're headed together as a group. It's incredibly customizable, so it's different for every single team, and every single period of time. So even the same team mapping 2 weeks apart can create a completely different map. We retain what we learn during the mapping sessions in a way that is very difficult if you're just reading a document or if you're in a meeting. Mapping kind of makes it real, and it sticks a little bit better in your mind. And then this scales really well. So I've run this with folks all over the globe simultaneously, and it's very, very friendly for folks who are remote. But even if you can't participate in the session, you have the map as a reference. So, we record these sessions, and then you have the map, and you can almost catch up to exactly where the team was when they were building it. So I'm going to do a really quick whirlwind tour of the maps themselves, and then hopefully we can just dive right into questions. But first of all, the outcome mapping really starts with discovery. So we try to collect not just context, but specific pains and goals and questions and ideas that folks have. So everything that's kind of floating around in folks' heads, we get it out onto the canvas. And this is a very simple representation, but we typically get a lot of results that look a lot like this. So we have many different goals, many different ideas, many different questions and pains, and we distill those down. Sometimes we're voting to bubble up the most powerful, or the things that resonate the most, or where we want to focus. But we'll also kind of affinity map things for different topics, and really try to clarify our collective understanding of all these different things that are floating around. But outcome mapping really boils down to a focus on a specific target outcome, and then understanding the benefits of that from a couple different perspectives. I think is very powerful to say, okay, this is the thing that we want, but the reason why we want that is important to us for this reason. It's important to our customers for a different reason. It's important to the stakeholders for a different reason. And we can get all that out. And I think that's very powerful, because oftentimes we have our own reasons for wanting something, but it's very important for us to understand other people's reasons for seeing value in something. And sometimes we don't get attached to a target outcome until we see it from a couple different perspectives, and then we kind of get it, right? So this is an opportunity to really get that out and in front of people and talk about it. And then the next thing we talk about is what could go wrong? What's going to get in our way? What's going to interfere with our progress? We can get that out in front of everyone. And then we can talk about other things that we're going to do. So we're going to go through the different maps of flow engineering, but we might also do some interviews or surveying or other research. And we can lay all that out and run it in parallel as well. So next we get to value stream mapping. And the main message here is just go simple, especially when you're starting out. Just simply represent a flow of work. You don't have to get it perfect. I often find it's easiest to start backwards. So think about something that was just delivered, and then lay out everything that it took to get there. So what happened before it was released, and what happened before it was deployed, and what happened before it was tested. And then very, very simple measurements can help us identify where that hotspot is. So where is most of the time spent? Or you can even ask folks, where is this most painful? Where is the biggest pain point here for you? Oftentimes we use data because data is really powerful and meaningful. So we'll use time measurement, but we can look at different things. So different roles that are involved, different tools. You can add different dimensions to this, but time is really, really powerful because the clock, as I said, the clock is always ticking. So we use that data to represent very high level performance. We primarily want to understand how much of this flow is spent sitting around waiting, and how can we go after that time, because that's usually the lowest hanging fruit. But sometimes it looks like this. You can use different color codes, different types of dimensions you can represent. You can see there's rework represented here, or work getting tossed back to earlier stages. This can really go wherever you want. We just keep it lean to try to make it quickly, because we have limited time, right? Everyone is busy doing their job. We don't always want to be in a workshop. We don't always have the luxury of taking time to work on the work rather than do the work. So this is what a common representation would look like. This is a case where we had a long release process and we were able to actually cut it in half. And faster lead times means we iterate faster, we learn faster, we have a greater sense of momentum. It's easier to estimate things. We're doing less work in progress. Many, many benefits from just accelerating. And we don't just try to go faster, we're actually eliminating waste that makes things faster. It's not trying to accelerate, it's acceleration by removing impediments. Another thing that's really powerful here is that people ask, well, I have 500 teams. I can't map all these teams. Like, that's crazy. I don't have time. Ideally, you have all those teams mapping themselves, but until you get that going, you can map a few teams and find common issues where you can fix it once and it fixes it for many different teams at the same time. So this can be very, very powerful. You can find opportunities where um, you're going to be able to level up many, many teams just by fixing a common issue. Speaking of dependencies, when we look at dependencies, what we're looking at is digging deeper into these hotspots to understand what is behind them. Like, what is the cause of the issue that we see here? So we dig a little bit deeper, we break that down a level deeper, we zoom in, and then we dig down where we see hotspots and concerns inside that flow. So there could be multiple things that are contributing to a delay, or multiple things that are contributing to a specific hotspot. And this is very easy to do with 5 whys, or you can use current reality trees, or whatever you like, whatever tool is accessible to you, whatever your preference is. And then I mentioned future state mapping. Future state mapping really is about looking at the current state and identifying all the things that we can do to improve. And specifically in the areas where we're seeing the biggest negative conditions, but also the biggest opportunities as well. So when we come to the flow roadmap, what we want to look at is collecting all those insights, all the learning, everything that we found as a result of our mapping over all of the maps. Sometimes we go all the way back to the outcome mapping or the initial discovery and say, that was a really good point. Didn't come up in the mapping of the value stream, but we should really go look at that. So we'll pull those things all together and prioritize them. Again, you can use any prioritization method you like. We use a pretty simple matrix typically, and then that corresponds to now, next, later. So we want to do the highest impact, highest feasibility things now. And those things that are a little bit more difficult, maybe there's a dependency involved, Maybe there's some reason why we can't do it immediately, or we just don't have time. We don't want to try and do everything at once. We'll slot those things in later. And those become the action items. And then we have measures of progress for each of those things so that we understand when we're heading in the right direction, when we're actually, how are we going to know that we're making progress? And to up the odds of making progress, we add owners to everything. So we add owners to at least the current time frame and make sure that there's somebody to carry it forward. And sometimes we're looking at ownership for later stages just to get those things going, right? Think about them in advance, plan them out, get them set up because they're going to come next. So we address these invisible gaps by bringing everybody together, by mapping. And flow engineering is really helpful in all kinds of different scenarios. But one of the things I think is most powerful is we have all these things that we're trying to do. A big migration project, we have a new acquisition, we are trying to change our ways of working. Flow engineering can really take you from knowing nothing or a lot of confusion, a lot of information, and get you focused on a specific target outcome that is achievable for you in the short term. And even if you know what that is, let's say you're a leader in your organization and you know exactly where to go. If you want to bring your team along with you in a way where they get it and they're all kind of bought in and on the same page, it's a great way to do that. It's a great way to focus everybody on one specific target outcome or a couple and make sure that that outcome is actually realized by connecting it to the work, connecting it to what's actually happening in the team and the organization. So we're building alignment by bringing folks together, but we're also engaging people. We're in kind of a crisis of engagement, right? We're in a crisis of distraction. We're in a crisis of complexity. So mapping is a great way to kind of combat that and bring people together and simplify the landscape for them, right? Take all these things that are floating around and really say, let's forget about all that and focus on this until we get that done. And then we'll move on to the next thing. And we can do this very quickly with flow engineering. So what this looks like, we focus on identifying value. We come together to pick a target and understand the landscape. And then we develop that landscape and build a greater sense of clarity in what's behind the biggest problems that we see. And then we develop this future state and make that actionable with a roadmap. So that's the whole thing. There's a book. There's a lot of resources online. I would love to hear questions, perspectives, your experience addressing flow constraints and the complexity of the landscape and all those things. So thanks for having me.